and welcome to The Nest. My name is Cecilia Mweni. As we always say on The Nest, parenting is a blank card. We write it as we go along. And today we have a guest who happens to be a dad. He'll be sharing with us his experience on being a dad and how it was like for him the first time and what kind of fears he had. Thank you for joining us. This is The Nest. Maybe you can start by introducing yourself. Tell us who you are and what you do.
My name is Eric. I'm a driver by profession and also training as a first aider.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So Eric, you've got kids?
Yes, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I've got two beautiful daughters.
What are their ages?
They are 6 and 5 years respectively.
Okay. So tell me, Eric, so 5-6 years ago, your wife was having a baby in hospital. How was that experience for you for the first time?
Well, for the very first time, there was lots of butterfly. Must admit that I was very tensed, but at the same time, having waited for 9 months, I think I was ready to receive my daughter. Mm-hmm. So I was really anticipating and just feeling excited. And the moment I received the call that she had delivered, I wanted to go back, but I was unable because it was a bit late at night. So until the following day, that's when I went and I received both of them. The day is still fresh in my mind like it was yesterday.
Okay. Yeah. So you go to hospital and suddenly your wife is there and there's this baby. Were you very fast at receiving the baby? Did you know how to hold the baby?
Not really, but when she was passed to me, I was able just to hold it. Although I was a little bit scared that I might crush the baby or maybe drop the baby. Yeah, but the feeling just grew and I got used to the feeling.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would you say helped you to prepare for that moment? Were you reading books? Did you go to website looking for information on parenting?
Not really, but I used to watch a lot of movies, and the scenes of parenting and seeing how fathers are handling their newborns. And also I learned within the neighborhood from the church where I fellowship. I'd been able to handle other babies. So it was not all that strange holding my daughter.
Okay. So what did you fear most?
Well, I must admit that having noticed or learned that now I'm a father to a daughter, a lot of things started running in my mind. Bringing up a daughter or a girl in our African setup or way of life maybe is different from the Western. But my fear mostly was by the time she's turning into teenage, will I be able to talk to her about the reality of life, about her sexuality, how free will I be to open up, just keep the mother out of it and sit her down and talk to her about the reality of being a young woman in an African setup. Consider that in a few years' time she'd be joining school, maybe in about 8 years she'll be going to high school, maybe far away from me. So those are the kind of fears that I had, that I don't know how it will be. If I have the opportunity to go and visit, maybe if she's in boarding school, or maybe if she's traveling back from boarding school, because there have been experiences and stories even in the media of how school-going children misbehave and how they carry out themselves, feeling that they are grown up and they can do their thing away from their parents. So those are the kind of fears that were playing in my mind. and they're still playing in my mind.
Okay, I'm just thinking for you it's very different considering from a dad's perspective. I mean, you're looking at teenagehood, and I'm thinking there are no immediate fears when they're younger, like when they're still tiny babies.
Yeah, the fear was there. The fear of providing for them, it was there and it's still there, because as a young parent, not only me, but even from other people that I've shared with, you can also concur with me that there are many young men who get married at the age of maybe 40 because they try to establish themselves financially, maybe first by acquiring the higher education. Maybe they go through university or colleges so that they can secure a good or well-paying job, so that by the time they're getting married, they're having babies, they'll perceive that they are able to provide. So there is that fear of providing for your child. Maybe over the weekend you want, like other parents, to take them for bouncing castle, maybe swimming, and financially you are unable to. So there is that fear in me, there is that fear in other men or fathers that have come across. Yeah.
Okay, how would you say one would overcome such kind of fear?
Well, one way of overcoming such kind of fear, number one, we must realize that when God gives you that opportunity, He gives you the ability to know how to handle your child, be it a boy or a girl. And you have that ability of talking sense into them, preparing them into teenagehood and adulthood. Because as much as you may want to run away from that responsibility, your kids look at you like they're David. If you compare the story of David and Goliath, no matter how big they have a Goliath in their life, they'll still run back to you. Because I remember when we were growing up, nobody will tell me that my father cannot fight them. So the same thing is in me, and I know it's in my daughters. They know that no matter how much you try to cross their path, they'll tell you, I'll tell my dad, yeah.
Okay. Well, they sound very manly fears, so to speak. The provision and what you're talking about, how to handle them when they become teenagers, and the fact that they're girls and you're a man, and you're worried about how you're going to handle them when that time comes. Now, my question would be, is it different? What kind of fears did your wife have? What was the difference between the fears you have and the fears that your wife had at that time?
Well, her fears were different because my first daughter is like her. She's too emotional. So when the first daughter was growing, as from the age of 2, 3, remember, there's no big gap between them. So when the second daughter came in, she was still feeling like she's the one who should be receiving all the gifts, maybe birthday cake, and not only wanting to accept that she has a younger sister. So my wife also had some difficulty in handling her because of the emotional aspect part of it. But the younger one, she has always just been there. Life is normal to her. And so their mother has, categorized that the eldest is more onto her side, and the younger one is the daddy's girl, and life goes on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So finally, what would be your word of advice to other dads who, like you, have got the same fears?
Well, my advice to other dads, as much as you're planning to, let me first say, a young man who is planning to get married, there is that fear of, will I be able to provide for them? Will they be able to look up to me as a father figure and listen to my advice? Because remember, the way our fathers and grandparents were brought up is different from us. But I can advise these parents that they should always be ready to take care of their daughters or their son, no matter the situation. Because remember, these kids, they look up to you. If you fail, psychologically, they might, get disturbed. So my advice to them is that pray to God to give you the wisdom and the knowledge of how to handle them, especially in our, like technology infested society, whereby they can the children today can access internet easily than unlike our times. So as a parent, be ready at any time to handle them. Yeah, and always pray that God will guide them according to His will.
Okay, so what I'm getting from you is that we need to pray about our parenting as parents, whether we are women or whether we're men.
Always.
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 Okay. Well, after the break, we'll be joined by an expert who is going to talk to us about these fears. How do we handle them and what can we do to overcome them? Join me. This is The Nest.
Sometimes the fears are not really warranted. I think it is important to parent from a place of love rather than a place of fear. When you parent from a place of fear, you sometimes overprovide for your child.
Welcome back to The Nest. Before the break, I was speaking to Eric, and now we've been joined by a new guest. I'll let her introduce herself. I know she's not new to the program, but yeah, please introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Liz Kaimba. I'm a clinical psychologist. I work with children, adolescents, and adults.
Okay. So Liz, before the break, I was talking to Eric and I was asking him about his fears as a parent. And what I got from him is that his fears were more of on the long term. Like he's got 2 daughters and he's thinking in 13 years' time, will I be able to talk to her about her sexuality? Am I able to provide for my family? And I was wondering, we've done a previous show where a lady has spoken about her fears, and it was more on, the immediate, the breastfeeding, the nutrition of the child and all that. And I'm wondering, why do we have such differences that the guy would think more long term and the lady would think short term?
I believe it follows with the roles that we have as parents. Mother's role usually is more of a homemaker, a nurturer. So she's more concerned about the feeding of the baby, about the well-being of the baby, the warmth of the baby. While the father is as a provider, his main role is thinking about the finances, about the security, and of course the plans then are longer term. But it is also important to be cognizant of the fact that mothers usually are the main caregivers of the child during the early stages of a child's development, whether the child is male or whether the child is female. So before the age of approximately 8 or 9, children are much more dependent on the mother. And although the father is also there in the as part of the family and playing his own role, his role becomes more important once the child is a little bigger, once the child is grown and needs more guidance and needs more masculine, support. So that would be the reason why the differences are there.
Okay.
Yes.
Maybe Eric, I can bring you in. Now that you're thinking long term and you've been given 14 days of paternity leave, why do you think those 14 days are important?
Thank you. I must appreciate that they're important. But then again, as a father, and most of the time I'm out trying to provide for them, and I don't have enough time to spend with them. I think even the government should increase the days to about 28 days, so that when I rest at home, I'm taking care of my newborn. I have enough time with them, and at the same time, of the 28 days, they should pay me because I need to provide for them. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's a bit funny, but anyway, what exactly would you say how would you tabulate that 28 days? How would it help to allay your fears for providing? How do you think it's helpful in just making you think the future of your children?
Well, the paternity leave, as much as it's just 28 days, remember, I've been waiting for this baby for 9 months.
Yes.
See? So at this time that I'm spending with them, I'm trying to bond. See? Because when I report back to work or maybe at my place of business, I'll be like thinking and working hard to bring food home, to provide for the mother because she's still breastfeeding. And I want to give the best, you see. So as much as I'm here, but truth be told, my mind is working like I need to bring more back home. So for the time that I'm here, maybe relaxing at home, at the same time, I'm not relaxing, I'm not settled. As a man, you can never just be settled looking at your newborn baby and the mother. Your mind is racing of how you're going to provide more because it's an extra mouth to feed.
Okay. Well, it's not 28 days, so wait until the government changes it till 14 days. And even the 3 months that we have as women, maybe I bring you in, Liz, over here. How do you think this time helps us prepare to, allay those fears that we have about parenting?
I don't know. I think the fears will always be present about parenting. We live in really tough times now. Because of the economic situation, a lot of parents, mothers included, worry about feeding their children, worry about taking their children to the best schools and all that. So the fears will always be there, but it's, as Eric says, it is positive that now at least we have, the men also have an opportunity to stay home and get to know the baby and bond with the baby. And once they're bonded, then it's also easier to provide for somebody that you know is a part of your family. For the mothers, mothers are usually very emotional and have a lot of anxiety around their children. So the 3 months just gives you at least an opportunity to spend sufficient time with your baby until the baby is more grown compared to the 2 months that we used to have previously, when we would leave the baby very young and usually with house help who you're not very sure about how they'll take care of the baby. But also we have to talk about the provision from many companies and from government, where even breastfeeding mothers are allowed to take some time early and go home and breastfeed their children. So that is progress really for us in our country, where we have that opportunity.
Okay. And from a psychologist's point of view, what brings about these fears?
Fears usually are about wanting to give the best to our children. And sometimes, of course, we go overboard with the fears. We go overboard with what we want to provide. Some of us have grown up in very tough situations, and you want to provide a better life for your child. Some of us just want to provide the best of the best. But sometimes the fears are not really warranted. I think it is important to parent from a place of love rather than a place of fear. When you parent from a place of fear, you sometimes over-provide for your child, and you don't give this child an opportunity to grow. You micromanage a lot of their events and a lot of their things. You fill up their schedules because you want them to be great in piano. You want them to be perfect tennis players. You want them to be very good in IT, so they don't have an opportunity to be a child. So sometimes our fears are very unwarranted. I think if we do parent from a place of love, where we know that we have to give a child also some space to grow, then it's a better point from which to parent, I think.
Okay, and how do you think then these parents can support each other to allay each other's fears? Because the guy is thinking long term, the lady is thinking short term, so they're not on the same level. So of course, that means I wouldn't be sensitive to your fears, to what you're feeling. So how do we bring the two together so that it's not everybody on their own?
Well, I don't think actually it's everybody on their own. I would look at it more as complementing one another. It would be very scary if all of us were concentrating on the early years and nobody is saving for the years to come, for the teenage years and university, and that space where the child is going to be needing more guidance on their sexuality, as Eric says. I think it's more complementary that we parent this way, but also even as we focus on our strengths and our roles when the babies are still young, it would be commendable if from time to time we sit down as a family and we discuss the issues that are there now, our fears, our anxieties around the babies now, and around the children even as they grow up into the future, and at the space at which we let them go out into the world. So I believe parents should always parent together, should always work as co-parents, instead of somebody focusing on this side and somebody focusing on the other side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Eric, maybe as one of your final words, how did you help allay fears that your wife had about parenting?
Well, like I said earlier on, prayer is paramount, and also open conversation really helps, because just like she has said, a mother's fears is different from a father's fears. You know, like she just wants to see the baby warm and well fed, see. But what I really did back then was to be able to talk to her, you know, about the future and the future of this baby, or both of them, in terms of, because at times it's really difficult on the man. You really want to give the best, just like she said, but you cannot do that. So the best that I could do was reassure her that as much as today it was difficult, but tomorrow God will open up a way.
Okay.
So I believe, and I always believed in the act of faith.
So what I'm getting from our guest, from Eric, is that we need to pray in the midst of all these fears that we have as parents, and also from our guest that we need to parent from a point of love. Right now we're going to have a special tribute to the fathers.
I'm just a part of your life, so to say, day in and day out, and day after day. When you tend me and mend me and lend me your heart, I don't know how or where to start. I'm not as close to you as I used to be, but then again I am, you see. Our hearts and our minds sometimes don't agree. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't believe when I say all the things that occurred to me. You protected me, you set me free, you showed me right from wrong, you showed me right from wrong. And I want you to know that I still grow, and I love you so, I love you so. I'm just a part of your life, so to say, day in and day out, day after day. You tend me and mend me and lend me your heart. I don't know how, where to start to say all the things that you've done for me. You protected me, you set me free. For you I sing this song.
So that was a tribute to the fathers. Well, coming up next is the shop and swap segment. Do you have any baby stuff that you're selling or you'd like to swap? Please send us the pictures on the WhatsApp number right on the screen. Well, I'd like to thank my guests, Liz and Eric, for joining me on the show. This has been The Nest, where we've been talking about parenting, the fear of parenting. And as we always say on The Nest, parenting is a blank card. We write it as we go along. This has been The Nest. My name is Cecilia Mweni. Thank you for joining us.